Every year since 1990, The Simpsons have released a Treehouse of Horror special, and over those years they've parodied so many horror classics, from The Fly, The Shining, The Exorcist, It, and yeah, many more. Too many to name. But even still, there are hundreds of horror movies that they still haven't spoofed yet. So today I'm going to be sharing the ones that I'm dying to see most of all, but I won't be doing this alone because I've asked a few amazing horror creators to join in and give me their picks too. So let's start with my first pick, Friday the 13th. James and I are huge fans of this franchise. We've even got a cute little Jason figure sitting on our bookshelf, and we put countless of hours into the Friday the 13th video game, and we're so upset when the servers got shut down. And honestly, I'll say it now, but it's way better than Dead by Daylight, and you can fight me on that. But I digress. So, with there being 12 movies in the Jason universe, I think a full Treehouse of Horror episode dedicated to just this franchise would be absolutely amazing. Kind of like how they did the It parody back in 2022. So I'm imagining that it's set in Camp Krusty and the first segment could be based on the original movie. And spoilers if you haven't seen it yet, but Jason isn't actually the killer here. It's his mum, Pamela Voorhees. And so I think the perfect casting here would be Agnes Skinner. Picture her in that white sweater sneaking around camp and taking out the campers, who are just younger versions of Homer, Marge, Patty, Selma, Comic Book Guy, and Moe getting picked off one by one. Plus, by adapting the first Friday the 13th, it will nicely tie back to this quote from the very first ever Treehouse of Horror.
Like when you look at Friday the 13th Part 1, it's pretty tame by today's standards.
So yeah, moving on to the second segment, and I can imagine that this would cover parts 2 and 3, where Jason wears the bag on his head before he eventually gets his iconic hockey mask. And I know it might sound sacrilegious, but honestly, I find Baghead Jason to be way scarier. And for Jason's role, it has to be Seymour Skinner, because, well, Jason's a total mama's boy, and Skinner is perhaps the biggest mama's boy out there ever.
Good boy. You can push your crib into Mommy's room tonight.
It's not a crib, it's a cot.
I can just imagine Agnes's ghost nagging on Seymour to kill the counselors and him keeping her severed head in his cabin, begrudging but also loving her at the same time. And rather than Homer's generation being the kids here, the counselors would of course be Bart, Lisa, Nelson and Milhouse. And of course, Lisa would be the final girl. Also personally, I would end it how part 2 ended, with Lisa pretending to be Jason's mother before then slicing his head off. That would be badass. And so for the last segment, I would love to see a Freddy vs. Jason parody. You'd have Seymour's Jason facing off against Willie as Freddy Krueger, which would be a very fun callback to Treehouse of Horror 6. And their rivalry makes even more sense because Willie does seem to have a wee bit of resentment towards Skinner.
You Scots sure are a contentious people.
You just made an enemy for life!
But that's enough from me for now. To help me talk about our next pick, I'm passing things over to Zach from Cece's World. And he's no stranger to this channel because he actually popped up in my video all about Mr. Burns' very complicated timeline. This guy's basically a walking encyclopedia of horror movies, and if you haven't checked out his channel, then what are you doing? He does amazing deep dives into horror characters, so with that, take it away, Zach.
One of my favorite aspects of Treehouse of Horror, or really any Simpsons parody anthology episode, is seeing how the established cast is used to fill the roles of the characters in the story being adapted. And in particular, I love when they find perfect roles for characters outside the main cast, like Groundskeeper Willie as Freddy Krueger. It is for this reason that I'd love to see them tackle 2025's newest horror masterpiece, Weapons. There's something so disturbing about the makeup-caked, withering antagonist, Aunt Gladys, and I think one of Bart's own aunts coming to live with the family could be equally horrifying for him. In particular, I think Selma has the perfect hair to mimic the horror of Gladys, and it could actually be kind of unsettling to see the usually detached and sarcastic character take on more of an obsessive kind of role. Part of what makes Gladys creepy is her swings from overly animated old lady to cold and commanding. We'd get to see a different side of Selma alongside her usual nonchalant attitude, and I think she'd feel right at home taking part in Gladys's witchcraft rituals. But Weapons isn't just celebrated for its antagonist. The suspense is created in its main story, which follows several different characters through the same 5-day period, allowing us to see different perspectives. How fun would it be to revisit 22 short films about Springfield as part of a Treehouse of Horror segment? The first character we follow in Weapons is Justine, a 3rd grade teacher whose entire class disappears in the middle of the night. At first, she seems to be unfairly scapegoated, but as we learn more about her drinking problems, forbidden romances, and troubled past, Her character is brought into question. I think either of the main Springfield elementary teachers would thrive in this role, but by default I have to give it to Miss Hoover. She's had no shortage of romances throughout the series, and when we first meet her in Lisa's substitute, she's a crying mess, forced to go on leave from teaching. Playing Justine would be an interesting callback to her first appearance. The second character we follow in Weapons is Archer, one of the parents of a missing child who becomes obsessed with trying to solve the case. He's one of the first who levies accusations against Justine at a PTA meeting, and for this reason I think it would be hilarious to give the role to Helen Lovejoy. Whether they go through with replacing Archer with her or not, she has to be at the PTA meeting to deliver her catchphrase.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Then you've got the police officer Paul, who's having an affair with Justine and later investigates the house where Gladys is lodged. While the obvious choice for any cop characters is Chief Wiggum, it's hard to imagine him on a date with Miss Hoover, so I'm gonna give this one to Eddie. Part of what moves the story forward in Weapons is when Paul arrests a druggie named James, who offers information on the whereabouts of the missing kids. There may never be a better casting choice for this one. You can basically just stick Jimbo in there and not have to change anything, from his hair to his outfit to the way he behaves, or even his name, which is technically James. So that just leaves the school principal, Marcus Miller. Let's not overthink this one. This is Skinner's role through and through. In the movie, we see Gladys put him under a spell and attack his husband, but given Principal Skinner's living situation, imagine Gladys making him kill Agnes. It could be both hilarious and cathartic at the same time. Speaking of Skinner, there is another 2025 horror film that could make a fun Treehouse of Horror segment, and that is the Ryan Coogler period vampire flick, Sinners. I don't really have the casting all figured out, but a while ago I quickly made this poster for Skinner's because the idea was just kind of stuck in my head. So here it is. It's not going to waste now. Thank you, Lydia, for having me on your channel again and allowing your audience to be exposed to my brain.
My next pick is The Long Walk. This one's fresh in my mind because it was the last movie that I watched in the cinema, and if you don't know the story, it's basically about a group of teenage boys who enter in this brutal high-stakes contest where they have to keep on walking or they get shot by the soldiers escorting them. It's a super intense movie with some very gnarly kills, but at its core, it's really about friendship. So I'll choose Bart to play Ray and Lewis to play Peter, because it's been far too long since Lewis has done anything in the show, and could be really interesting to see a relatively unknown character in a main role. Nelson would play Gary, Hubert as Ben, and this guy as the Major. Yep, the bodyguard coach from Mayor to the Mob, who, fun fact, was voiced by Mark Hamill, who also plays the general in the actual movie.
Well, your dive wasn't bad, but I just didn't believe you. No!
Or if you want a more recurring character, then we could always go with Leopold, who is Superintendent Chalmers' very scary assistant.
All right, you little punks. Pick up your freaking ears.
The Long Walk is based on the novel by Stephen King, and speaking of the novels, thank you so much for making my novel Script to Scream #1 in the slasher horror category on Amazon. And in case you missed the big news, the synopsis is this. When a washed-up 80s scream queen Jennifer joins a low-budget reboot of her old horror franchise, she soon discovers that the on-screen kills are terrifyingly real. Trapped in a creepy, abandoned Christmas theme park, she and her co-stars must fight to survive or risk becoming a part of the director's final cut. Think of it as Scream meets Galaxy Quest. So if you've ever enjoyed my videos and want to support me, then I'd really appreciate it if you pre-ordered your copy today. The link is in the pinned comment. Thank you so much, and let's now talk about my next pick, The Thing. I am so surprised that The Simpsons haven't parodied this already, because basically this is one of the greatest ever horror sci-fi movies ever made. It's about a group of researchers in Antarctica who encounter an alien life form, and this creature can take the form of any organism, copying them and mimicking them absolutely perfectly. And so that means anyone in the group could be the Thing, and their paranoia tears them apart as nobody knows who to trust. So I see the story going like this. Homer and some of the other guys working at the nuclear power plant are sent to Antarctica by Mr. Burns to drill into ice to find an energy source, and so this unearths the Thing. The movie opens with a helicopter chasing down a sled dog, and it turns out the dog is actually the Thing in disguise. The man is trying to stop it from spreading, but because he's speaking Norwegian, the researchers can't understand him and they end up shooting him instead. Now, if The Simpsons were to parody this, then the sled dog has to be Santa's little helper, and the Norwegian guy has got to be Willy. He's ranting in Scottish gibberish that no one understands, and of course they think he's the crazy one. Homer would be the perfect stand-in for Kurt Russell's character MacReady. I can imagine him going crazy with a flamethrower, and for Keith David's role, I'll have to go with Carl. He's already the no-nonsense guy of the group, so it fits in perfectly. You could really have a great dynamic between Homer and Carl squaring it off in that final scene where neither trusts the other. And so to talk about my next pick, we have Cody Leach, and I've been subscribed to Cody for years now. I love his movie reviews, rankings, and tier lists, so if you're into horror content, then his channel really is a must-watch.
What is up, guys? Cody Leach here, and I was a massive fan of Simpsons back in the day, and one of my favorite elements of it, of course, is the Halloween episodes, the Treehouse of Horror parodies, and one that I think we absolutely need to have exist for this world to be right is a parody of The Lost Boys, which we'll have to retitle The Lost Bros, because as Groundskeeper Willie says, you want to get sued? And I think there's so much potential to do a fun little parody that plays a lot of homage to the original film while also doing its own little Simpsons goofy twist on it. As far as characters, of course, Bart would be taking over the lead role of Michael. It'd be a bit of a gender swap, but you would have Lisa take the place of Sam as the more level-headed, reasonable sibling. Homer would be Max, the seemingly innocuous, nerdy boyfriend of Marge, who is the mom of Bart and Lisa. Grandpa is going to stay as Grandpa. And then as the leader of the Lost Boys in the David role, we would of course have Nelson. And then for the Frog Brothers, we would switch those out with Milhouse and Martin. The Simpsons family would move to this foggy coastal town of Krampus-Karla. That was the best little change that I had there. And of course, after being the new kids on the block, Bart quickly falls in with a group of mysterious skateboarders who only come out to play at night. They're cool, rebellious, and strangely obsessed with cherry-flavored Slurpees. They spend their nights rolling around on their four wheels, hanging upside down in the rafters of the old amusement pier, and their leader Nelson promises Bart eternal freedom and endless mischief if he joins their gang. Meanwhile, Lisa goes into town and befriends two eccentric comic shop clerks. Milhouse and Martin are Frog Brothers, who would be retitled the Toad Brothers, who claim the town is crawling with vampires. Armed with garlic necklaces, they set out to save Bart before it's too late. And then, of course, by the end of the episode, back at home, Marge has been secretly seeing a charming but mysterious man that she met at the grocery store, who is none other than Homer, Max, the father of the so-called Lost Bros. Homer reveals his grand plan. He wants to merge the families so that Lisa can teach his boys to stop being so lazy and sleeping all day, which is the ultimate reveal that they're not vampires at all. They're just a bunch of shitty teenagers who don't do anything but party all night, drink Slurpees, get all sugared up, and then sleep all day long. They need structure, he insists, between bites of garlic bread at dinner, because you never invite a vampire into your house, you silly boy. It leaves you powerless. The climax would unfold at the Simpsons house, or I guess the grandpa's house, where after having this revelation of Max's grand plan, Homer's grand plan, Lisa will save the family by pulling out her saxophone and doing a rendition of I Still Believe, distracting them long enough for Grandpa to unknowingly burst through the front of the house in his truck, impaling Homer and ending the Lost Bros forever. But Grandpa walks in a total Grandpa fashion, has no idea what's going on, and just exclaims that he forgot his hat, puts his hat on, gets back in the truck, and drives back out of the front of the destroyed house. Evil has been vanquished, the family has been saved, and Krampus-Karla lives to go on another day for maybe another vampire adventure in the future. Thank you guys for checking out my idea for an episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Simpsons Theory for featuring me this year. And stay spooky, because Halloween season is upon us.
Now, let's move on to Carrie. When I taught The Simpsons lore at Fox a few years ago, showrunner Matt Selman told me that when they think about a big episode, they often start with the poster. And I can totally imagine this Treehouse of Horror poster with Lisa drenched in blood, which is a direct callback to this iconic Carrie image. And Lisa would be the perfect stand-in for the shy and bullied Carrie White. Marge would step in as her overprotective mother, doing her best to shield Lisa from the world, while Sherry, Terry, and Nelson plot to humiliate her by dumping a bucket full of pig's blood on her at prom. And so the ending could have Lisa using her telekinetic powers to lock everyone in the gym and calmly enact her revenge. I think it would look visually amazing. My next pick would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or should that be the Springfield Chainsaw Massacre? This is one of the most iconic and terrifying horror movies ever made, and if The Simpsons were to parody it, the casting would pretty much write itself. I mean, come on, you've got Cletus's entire clan standing in as the Sawyer family. Cletus himself would make a great Nubbins, running around all twitchy and weird, and this big cousin of his could have been a stand-in for Leatherface.
It angries up my fists. I just remembered my feud with this hair tree. Get her done.
But if you want to make it a more familiar character for this part, then you could always have Homer here in a much darker role. Plus, he's no stranger to a chainsaw.
Mike, do you want to see my new chainsaw and hockey mask?
So it could definitely work. But then again, you could have Comic Book Guy also, because I can totally see him obsessively collecting faces the way he collects comic books. You can even picture him complaining that this one is the worst face ever. And of course you could end it with that iconic scene of Leatherface swinging the chainsaw around, but this time he accidentally chops his own limbs off. But for my final pick, I'm going to be really cheeky here and choose something that's not a movie, but I would say it is still horror adjacent, and that is Squid Game. So, the original series follows a contest where 456 desperate players risk their lives by playing deadly versions of children's games. And the prize is a massive cash jackpot, but to win, you have to survive. Now, imagine that setup with The Simpsons. With 456 players, you could already pack in so many characters from Springfield's past and present. Homer would naturally be player 456, Marge would be player 222 with Maggie strapped to her, and Mr. Burns is the obvious choice for player 1, the frail old man who turns out to be the mastermind behind the entire thing. And for the front man running the games, it's gotta be Smithers. He keeps everything organised and shipshape. But here's where I'd really twist it, instead of just copying the original eliminations. Because, you know, I'd like to switch things up to keep it unpredictable. Because imagine if the Simpsons family got knocked out early, leaving the spotlight on secondary and minor characters who usually don't get any attention. Picture Moe, Comic Book Guy, Disco Stew, or even Hans Moleman. They're all clawing their way through the final round, and it would be such a fun way to subvert expectations while giving the lesser known characters their moment to shine. So yeah, we've come to the end of the video, but what did you think of my list, and are there any other horror movies that you'd like to see parodied in the show? Let me know in the comments. Also, a big thank you to Zach and Cody for joining in on this video. And if you're interested in 80s satirical horror, then pre-order my novel Script to Scream now, and the link is in the description.